Hi there, Chris from TotallyEV, and here doing a dedicated audio review of the MG4 EV. If you want a detailed review of the vehicle itself, do check it up on your pod banner, down in the description below, or indeed in the pinned comments. Now, in terms of its audio configuration, it's actually quite baffling to see that the SE and the SE Long Range have only got 4 audio drivers, and by that we mean there's no rear drivers. Indeed, over here you've got 170mm mid-range drivers found within each of the front doors, and 35mm tweeters found towards the A-pillars. If you do want rear drivers, you'll have to go for the Trophy Long Range, which we have on review, and that adds 170mm mid-range drivers within each of the rear doors and also gives 3D sound processing and a virtual subwoofer. Speaking of which, if you do want to alter the sound, you'll want to navigate on the 10.25-inch infotainment system. And here it's great to see that you've got a multi-band EQ. In our case, we've taken 1 notch off 80 Hz, left 500 Hz and 1 kHz untouched, added 2 notches to 5 kHz and 1 notch to 16 kHz. As for the sound field balancing, we've left it as standard. We have disabled the rear seat silent mode, and we've also gone on the all 3D sound preset and enabled virtual subwoofer. Of course, these are our own settings, so it very much depends as to your own user preference, so do feel free to tinker around with it, but this is what we felt actually resulted in the best sort of sound quality. Now, for you to connect up to the infotainment system, you have got Bluetooth, whereby the SBC and AAC codecs are supported only. If you want higher quality playback, you'll want to plug in your smartphone, and here Android Auto and Apple CarPlay are supported via the USB Type-A port. However, if you want even better quality playback, and specifically for audiophiles out there, you might want to use USB playback, and that's achieved via the USB Type-C port. Now, in our case, we're able to play MP3, WAV and FLAC files without any sort of glitches. And better still, via USB playback, we're also able to play back some videos, whereby we've got support for MP4, MOV, MKV, and also FLV, all of which are certainly appreciated and can keep your, let's say, passengers entertained, because you can even watch a movie. So moving swiftly on, we get onto cabin noise, and here the numbers will be on your screen, and these were measured by us using a sound meter. It's very much comparable and on par with some of its rivals, and specifically ones which come in at a little bit more of a premium price tag, specifically at higher speeds. Better still, the MG4 EV does not suffer from any sort of low-end resonance when traversing uneven terrain like the ZS EV, and therefore means that you've got actually a pretty quiet in-cabin experience no matter the sort of roads that you're traversing on. Now, with all of that in mind, let's get onto a sound demo. We appreciate it's not going to be ideal because it's going to be over YouTube and using microphones, so it's not going to give you a lifelike reproduction, but we'll give you a little bit of a taster. Do check out the annotations on your screen to understand how the system is actually running, and the song that we'll be using is from Priya J. It's titled Like Me, and you can find it down in the description below in case you're interested.
I know you can.
So with the audio demo out of the way, let me get onto my subjective opinion. And here the sub-bass extension is cut short, even with the virtual subwoofer option enabled. But it is certainly appreciated to have that option because it somewhat simulates how a subwoofer would act. Of course, systems out there that have a dedicated subwoofer unit, so for example, let's say the Bose system within the Nissan Leaf, will certainly excel in this department because a dedicated audio driver to produce those sub-bass tones is going to be far better than a virtual subwoofer. Now, as for the mid-bass tones, they're actually pretty punchy and exciting. The mid-range drivers that I found within each of the 4 doors, at least on the Trophy long range, are certainly punchy and pretty exciting and will leave lots of people with a smile on their face. Now, unfortunately, the lower mids are pushed back, and it's somewhat of a trend with other vehicle manufacturers at this price point, whereby they're not really emphasized. Now, you could EQ it to your heart's content through the infotainment system, but by doing so, you'll take away from the lower mid accuracy. The plus side, however, is that the upper mids do extend pretty well and can be EQ'd to a certain degree. As for the highs, we would actually suggest adding a few notches to the treble EQ in order to get a little bit more of that zingy nature, specifically at the front of the cabin where you're treated with those tweeters that are found within the A-pillars. However, at the rear, given that you do not have any sort of tweeters, the high-end extension is somewhat lackluster. Now, what really took me by surprise was this overall Soundstage reproduction. And yes, it won't compete with more premium offerings, for example, the likes of the Tesla Model 3, the Volvo XC40 or C40 Recharge, or let's say the Kia Soul EV, but in comparison to a lot of its other competitors, such as the Renault Zoe, Nissan Leaf, VW ID3, Cooper Braun, it's actually pretty impressive. The positional cues are done really well, and the overall width and depth that you get, at least on the Trophy long range, whereby you've got 6 audio drivers, is, again, pretty good. Now, it's worth considering that in our case, we actually preferred leaving the 3D sound on all, whereas on driver and off, it did sound somewhat lackluster. Specifically on the latter option, it really subdued the overall audio experience that one could attain. Of course, that is more of a reference sound, but again, takes away in terms of the overall presence that one can attain within the cabin. Ultimately, what we're trying to portray over here is that the MG4 EV's audio system, at least in the Trophy long range, is actually pretty impressive, and as a result gets our approved audio award. Now, if you are considering the regular model, in other words the SE or the SE long range, it is worth considering the Trophy long range purely for its audio system, because those 2 extra audio drivers and the 3D sound processing are certainly appreciated. And in comparison to its competitors, it's on par, if not a little bit better in certain departments. But of course, that's just our opinion of the audio system, so it'd be intrigued to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. And if you've liked this independent detail review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which are greatly appreciated and allows us to continue delivering honest reviews like this one. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.